The sideboard here at the StarCityGames.com Modern Open in Charlotte, part of the SCG Tour, brought to you by Ultimate Guard. I'm Nick Miller alongside Worcester Legacy Open champion Eli Kassis.
Hi everybody.
We get to put that in front of your name now.
Yay, finally. For a while, I was competing for like the most number of top 8s without a win. Not a good accolade.
Got to get that off of your resume.
Yeah.
And you got top band along the way.
I get all the credit for that.
So everyone can either thank or blame you.
Yeah, there's a Reddit thread just blaming me. A lot of people, I got a lot of hate for that, apparently.
Well, let's see what you can...
Apparently there's a Topless Miracles deck, though. That's really good in Legacy, so don't hate me just yet, Internet.
You can still play blue-white control if you really want to.
Yeah, well, no, apparently it's good, too. This is what people are telling me. People that know, too. Important, apparently, making a comeback. You get to draw Terminus on their turn off the upkeep trigger, and then Terminus anyway.
Yep. Bringing in all the tech, even for the decks you're not talking about right now,
Yes.
which, you've been working on these 3-color, 4-color, retreat to Coral Home decks and basically collected company decks, all kind of mishmashed together for a while. But, over the last couple of weekends, you've been playing kind of retreat decks. Now you're playing a Naya company deck with the Devoted Druid Vizier combo, but it's not focused directly on that.
Yeah, so I'm trying to play a deck that's not easily disruptible because the overlord in the room right now is Grixis Shadow, and we don't want to be susceptible to their strategies. If you have a linear path, they have an easy way of disrupting it. They see exactly what you have on the first turn, they know what avenues to attack you on, so this deck is trying to kind of go wide.
Right. In the past, you would do the retreat to Coral Elm thing, or you'd have other combos kind of running around. Now you're just kind of this really value collected company deck that has a lot of things going on in it, but isn't dependent on just the Devoted Druid Vizier Remedies combo.
Right. You still need the combo because against other faster combo decks, they'd overrun a creature deck. So it's really nice having this combo because it's the fastest creature combo if you're actually going to try to race them, which is great to have. And then if you need to play the fair value game, Naya the Reliquary is just such a beast. It's so good against almost every deck in the room. And then Collected Company into 2 Knights sometimes is just like, okay, that's game all on its own. You don't really need to hit Devoted and Vizier. The cool thing though is Knight can actually be part of the combo in this deck too, because you use it, you go get Kessig Wolfrun, and then you have the infinite mana from Vizier and Devoted Druid, and then you make your Devoted Druid huge, and then you beat them up with a 1 billion trampling Devoted Druid, which is fun.
Right, and you've had Knight of the Reliquary in all your builds of this deck, as soon as we had the deck in the format, but now you're kind of going away from all in that. We're doing a Knight value deck, but with the pieces from everything else. Other things floating around in this deck, I think it's important to note, Oath of Nissa here, 4 copies, whereas you only have 2 copies of Vizier for Devoted Druid. You now have 4 Oath of Nissa to kind of facilitate all the things you're doing in the deck.
Yeah, it used to be 2 Oath of Nissas and 3 Viziers, if anybody saw my top 32 performance at the last Open, but I found that you'd draw these Viziers, you'd get disrupted off the combo, and then you're playing these 2-mana 2/1s, and it was really, So I really like the 2 in the list now. You have, I think, 4, 8, 9 different ways to help you kind of go find it, which is plenty. Plenty, especially since you're not even going for the combo most games. And then if you do incidentally have it, you blow up on the spot. If you don't already have it, Devoted Druid's just good on its own too. You can ramp from 2 right into 4 and hit your Collected Company. I'm running a lot less 1-drop birds in this list. There's only 6 as opposed to 8 where I was running before. So it's nice having the Oaths as something else to do on turn 1 now too.
All right, plus you even get those draws where, you of course draw the bird on the 2nd turn, so then you get to kind of have other things you can do as well.
Yeah.
When you have Oath there, filling the 1-drop slot. 2 Dustwatch Recruiter here, which can find the 1 Walking Ballista. That's kind of the go-to thing to do with infinite mana in the format. Yeah,
a lot of times people are running 2 Walking Ballistas, but since we have Eternal Witness, there's no real reason to need a 2nd copy. It can't ever be Path to Exile because you can just respawn and do whatever you want with it. So it's really just the right number, I found.
Other things you can do with infinite mana, secure the wastes here. Standard all-star for a moment, but this thing can definitely catch some people out of nowhere, I bet.
So Death Shadow, especially Grixis lists, they don't have a great way to deal with multiple creatures, and it can pick up all the Snapcasters if they're going that avenue, because what you want to do is Path to Exile their big creatures, Eternal Witness back your Path to Exiles, and just keep them off the large threats. So they try to play this gamey game with their Snapcasters and Kolaghan's commands. Something like Secure the Waste can shut down that avenue of victory. It can just pull you ahead, because they can be like, blocker, I'm at 5, beating you with Death Shadows, and you're like, sweet, secure for a lot. Untap, maybe even have Gavany Township and make them really huge, and then just crush it and kill them out of nowhere. But with Township, it's just awesome. Against control decks, it's great. It's an instant speed, which is nice to have more interaction because I cut blue and you don't have that. Eternal Witnessing it back and really just abusing it, or even just using guys to make Convoke easier with Quarter Calling. Does a lot of cool things, but the most fun thing is definitely going to be making 1 million 1/1s at instant speed with the combo at the end of their turn.
Right.
They're going to be like, oh, phew, he couldn't kill me. Like, oh, end of your turn. I got this.
Yeah, you're going to get them. Yeah. When you pass the turn not killing them, they're like, all right, we might get out of this.
They're like, no. You got one more turn.
Yeah. Now, you also mentioned Quarter Calling there. This is a card you've kind of trimmed down to 1 copy.
Yeah.
Most of the builds running around are trying to abuse as many tutorers and ways to get the combo as possible. You're here only running 1. As you said, you already have other ways to get it between Collected Company and Oath of Nissa.
Right. So the 1 copy is a lot because of Grixis Shadow. I mean, they just tear apart your hand and removal spell your threats, and then you end up sitting with these cords in your hand and can't do anything with them. It's even hard to have 3 greens sometimes because you're playing 3 colors. Other lists are even playing 4 colors. So I've gone down to 1. It could be 2. Honestly, I'm like torn on that number, but I don't think more than 2 is right, and I don't think you can risk playing more than 2 in the format right now. It's just too hard to make a deck consistent that runs that and doesn't get disrupted easy enough to do that.
You also have 2 Scavenging Ooze running around, Courser Crew Fix, classic Eli card, and then a Fairgrounds Warden as kind of your go-to removal spell creature of choice.
Yeah, I kind of expected people to be playing Extra Hate. I ran into on Moto a couple people were playing Linvala. Somebody even played it on me in game 1, and I was like, whoa. So I really wanted like 1 tutorable thing that would stop whatever it was they were doing if they were using a creature to stop me doing something. It's also actually really good against the Jund Death Shadow list because they're running Tarfires, and even Fatal Push they need to have like a land go to the graveyard or something to activate it. So it's actually not a bad cord target sometimes against even the fair decks.
1 EE kind of rounding out your 1-ofs in this deck. Previous builds, you had moon effects in the main deck, whether, Magus of the Moon, a card you could tutor up. This deck kind of going away from that, you have the moons in the sideboard. What's the idea behind not having that in the main deck anymore?
So the moons in the main deck can disrupt some of your land packages, which you have as threats. So your Wolf Run would get shut off, your Township would get shut off, and you really want a Knight of the Reliquary into those to start abusing the power of this deck a lot. So like shutting down your own strategy and not necessarily even doing anything to your opponent's strategy is not great. If you're up against Merfolk, yeah, shut down some Mutavaults, like it's not really that powerful. So it's just better to have them in the sideboard and bring them in the matchups where you want to have them and catch people by surprise when you do so. And not playing Magus in the Moon specifically, even though you can Coco into it, just because so many decks are playing red now with their multiple colors, and they're just going to bolt it or Tarfire it. And like nobody's boarding out Tarfire against a Devoted Druid deck anyway. So I thought Blood Moon was more important, especially if I wanted to beat decks like Scapeshift, just landing a Blood Moon and then like, oh, I didn't bring in my enchantment destruction because you're playing a green-white deck with no enchantments. So you just get them out of nowhere sometimes.
Speaking of the land package, you also have a Horizon Canopy, but you have Grove of the Burn Willows as part of your mana base.
Yeah.
This is something we saw out of the Crack Clan Ironworks deck and all these other kind of offshoot decks that can run it as just a way to beat Death Shadow occasionally. I
have this sweet snapshot of Moto Match playing this deck, and my opponent has fetched, gone to 12, played 2 Death Shadows and passed, and on my turn I play the Grove of Burn Willows, take the picture, and then instant speed, give them a life to scoop both of them. It was pretty fun. But yeah, getting to hold off a Death Shadow, because you don't actually attack them with the second in the early game, you let them hurt themselves, and you actually try to even prevent them from hurting themselves, and then you build up to a terminal mass, and then which you then come in. And that's how you strategize to beat them.
Okay, we'll move to the sideboard here because you have some spicy ones running around in here.
Oh, yeah.
You have your Blood Moons, which you mentioned, and then, Crumble to Dust to kind of fight your mana decks.
Yep.
Then we have what looks like a burn package with Lone Missionary and Core Firewalker, but this can also come in.
Burnt and Forge Tender.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Confuse that because this is a card that can kind of help you out in a lot of the sweepers and all that.
Yeah, I like Core Firewalker, but I don't like double white. That's the same reason I'm playing Fairgrounds Warden instead of Fiend Hunter. Double white's hard to achieve in this deck. There is 2 planes, but there's only 4 fetchable lands to go get them, and you don't want to have to shock yourself. If you'll notice, I'm not actually playing the red-white shock today. I'm actually just playing 2 shocks, trying to make this as best I can against decks like Burn and the other really aggressive strategies. So Burnt and Forge Tender gets to come in against decks that run Conflagrate like Dredge or Anger of the Gods, which is in a lot of sideboards. So it's very flexible, and it's a sweet Court of Calling tutor target, especially against those, because they don't see it coming. They go to Wrath you, and even with no mana up, you can just tap 4 guys and go get that.
Yep. completely blanket.
Yeah.
Then you have your Graveyard Hate here between Bojuka Bog and Surgical Extraction. Bog, of course, can be brought into play with Night, which is pretty nice. Then you have kind of your creature package here that you can kind of tutor up. Zealous Conscripts, Rex Sage, 2 Eidolon of Rhetoric, Gaddock T.
I like how casually you say Zealous Conscripts. That's definitely a pet card of mine. I played it in a lot of decks in the past, and it's been known to take a Nahiri on Ultimate, and then I get to Ultimate it. So it's a lot of fun to bring it in a lot of random matchups. It's actually really good against the blue-white decks that people are playing to fight Grixis Shadow. So I'm anticipating the people anticipating the most powerful deck and bringing something in, because they bring in Elspeth and they bring in Gideon, and then they try to like build up to whatever it is they do. But Elspeth, they climb, expecting to get you with their ultimate. If you take it and get to ultimate it yourself, so good.
Yeah, I don't flinch saying it in your sideboard because I've seen you kind of pull this trick numerous times.
Yeah.
But it's definitely there. I've seen it take people's Karns and Ugins and just you name it.
Yeah.
Things that really matter.
Yeah, taking Ugin is especially good. It's like, oh good, you're at Ultimate Zone finally? Yes.
We're saving the best for last here. Amonkhet, Dusk to Dawn here, does everything you want in this deck.
Yeah, I feel like some people are going to say, because I played it in the finals of a GP in Limited, they're like, oh, had to play it again. But no, it wraths the Death Shadow decks, which is pretty sweet. But the backside, the Dawn, brings back every single creature in the main deck back to your hand from the graveyard. Every single creature has power 2 or less, even the Knight of the Reliquaries, because in that zone they're just 2/2s. So it's actually pretty sweet recursion against the decks that are doing a lot of Wrath effects. It's actually really good against the Living End decks too. The top side kills all of their guys, and eventually you get to a point where you want to recur some dudes. So it actually does it's a lot of cool things for the deck.
All right, so when you come to this event with this deck, you're obviously shooting #1 for the Grixis Death Shadow matchup. What else are you kind of looking at, and what are you kind of avoiding with this deck, or wanting to avoid with this deck?
Well, I actually still want to avoid the Death Shadow deck. It's that good. I'm not trying to get anything bad, people. Don't create any Reddit threads. But yeah, I still want to avoid it. It's running a lot of creature hate. It's running a lot of card advantage and a lot of disruption, which is not what this deck wants to face. This deck probably wants to play against the fair decks just all day long. Any deck that's trying to win on turn 5, for instance, you get a freebie. It's actually really good against Affinity, strangely, which you wouldn't think just by looking at it on paper. But Affinity is one of those fair decks now. It's not playing a lot of disruption, and they're not winning before turn 4 very often. So this is a great matchup for this deck also.
What a world we live in, where in Modern we can call Affinity a fair deck.
Yeah.
All right, well, any closing thoughts or anything else you want to say about the deck before we sign out here?
Just that, if you're going to play something like this, make sure you get your reps in. You really need to know when to do which spells and what lines to take. This is not an easy deck. This is not a beginner deck, so know that going into it.
It's got expert on the packaging, like back in the day with the Magic sets. All right, Eli, well, we're doing this in round 2. You have 2 buys, of course, from your great season 1 so far. We wish you the best of luck the rest of the way here. For Eli Kassis, I'm Nick Miller. Stay tuned to StarCityGames.com all week long for the action here in Charlotte.